Good afternoon. I hope you are all doing well, or at least kind of sort of reasonably well, given our conditions. Um, Here's the second to last day. Let's get started. I had to do that, just a little bit of fun, because this is driving me crazy. We have another month of being in quarantine. Great. Fun, fun, fun. Well, this is meant to help you uh, get a sense of what you might be running into next fall and to know more generally. I mean, again, you don't think you're going to run into these things when you graduate from college. Leave it all behind. Yeah, a few of you will, but you'll be surprised, and I'll be talking about that. So it's easy to point it out that this is for Maria Schmeckley, but Frank Beck may scrape Twitter data. He's done it, I think, 2 times so far, and that's qualitative. And you'll be analyzing Twitter data about race in Central Illinois. And you might want to know how to do that, or have a sense of what you're going to be doing. Not to mention that definitely you will be doing qualitative research for Maria Schmeckley. So why do they do that? Because of what I say here in the first line. Qualitative data offers insights that quantitative data just can't. And I'll be talking about that in Roman numeral 1. Usually it requires going out and getting your own data. As we saw in secondary data, there are people who are saving qualitative secondary data. But usually, it's pretty rare that somebody's going to even want to use that. It is happening, but it's rare. Mostly you want to go out and get your own data. So let's start with overall features before we get to the 3 particular methods I will be talking about. And they do not exhaust the list of all qualitative methods. You'll just be running into the 3 most common in sociology. All 3 and others share the fact that qualitative data is sought because so often the research is exploratory. Something unstudied, something you didn't know was coming. I am sure there's going to be, and maybe right now, there are qualitative researchers working on COVID-19. And you tend to be inductive. You tend to just get the data, get lots and lots and lots of data, and then start seeing patterns. You don't start with the patterns. You just start with the data. An example would be my dissertation on bicycles 100 some years ago. An example would be the example I keep using, the internet, before the year 2000. Those are all exploratory, classic uses. Looking at a pandemic in these conditions, looking at lockdowns. You could do a qualitative study of lockdowns, like the lack of productivity, the lassitude, the what time is it, what day is it attitude that more and more people are having. All great for qualitative studies. Focus on social context and connections between social phenomena, and especially culture. You might get away from hypotheses, theories, law-like statements to find out about the conditions in which those hypotheses work. So the 5th criterion for establishing causation was, when does the hypothesis apply and when does it not? Under what conditions, in what context? So quantitative, deductive, nomothetic researchers are looking at these hypotheses, looking at these statements of causation, and they operate within conditions. Qualitative researchers are looking at the conditions themselves, those very conditions. I might do a study of protesters and conspiracy theorists. I take a dim view of nearly all conspiracy theories, and if anybody wants to email me, I can very happily email you back and tell you why. but people do not believe things just because. They have reasons. And so what if I take a dim view? If I want to understand conspiracy theorists instead of judge them, I could do qualitative research and ask them what they think, why they think, and look at the conditions of their lives to see what helped lead to that. That's what qualitative researchers do so well. They're usually using case study methods. They tend not to say, I'm doing a case study. That does, I think, tend to be much more the language of historical sociology. But as a historical sociologist, I look at what qualitative researchers do, and it looks like a case study to me. So quantitative researchers, collect lots and lots of little bits of data because it's a little bit of data about each case, but it's a lot of cases. So eventually it's a lot of data. You're looking for a lot of data also as a case study researcher, as a qualitative researcher, but you're looking for a lot of data on one or two cases. So sociology majors might collectively be a case of a department's majors in the United States, some sociology departments majors. And another major feature is ideographic explanation. So nomothetic explanation is, God, I hate that word. And if you do too, good. But we still have to use it. So nomothetic explanation is looking for generalities, general statements. That's what theories are for. Ideographic explanation looks for particular, unique, specific events, often in unfolding interconnected sequence. I mean, once you say sequence, you're now talking history, time passing. This happens, then this happens. That's a sequence. But you're looking for the particular, the unique, you're looking for the interconnected, and it can lead to nomothetic thinking, it can lead to generalizations, it can lead to hypotheses, which you then test deductively. I would be fine if people used my research on bicycle markets to look at markets more generally. One of the reasons that most research qualitatively is ideographic, looking at the particular, is that it focuses on meanings, it focuses on culture. And I've used the words ideographic and constructionist together, but you can do ideographic research that's not cultural. So you could think of ideographic research as having two types, cultural constructionist or materialist. But in sociology, certainly qualitative researchers often, almost always, do focus on meanings. They're not just focused on material, counting objects or counting bodies or looking at situations. They're focusing on why people think what they think, what thoughts people have about their world, about what they do, and so on. This requires being aware of one's own thoughts, reflexivity, sensitivity to one's own position as a researcher. The qualitative researchers rarely believe in objectivity. They just reject it. They instead embrace their own subjective position, their particular, unique understandings. This means they have to become very aware of their own subjective position. If we were to use me as an example, I need to be aware of my race and class and gender and sexuality and education. That's a component of class often. my own social position and my biases, my assumptions. Not doing this is sociological malpractice. You've got to be aware as a qualitative researcher of your own situation. Now, the next point, G, is really important. Two little vignettes. One, I'm at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, and it's the fall of 2001. That's the National Library of France. Every day, I would do hours and hours of microfilm reading, and then I would have my block of cheese and my baguette and my orangina, which is basically carbonated orange juice. The French love orangina. And I would sit there and type like a fiend about what I just learned. What does this have to do with markets? This was an example of data gathering and data analysis occurring together. And it did change my design along the way. By just finding out a year before, as I said, at the Hagley Museum, that there was tons of stuff on bicycles in the 1880s. I thought, I've got to change this. Take it back before 1890. That's a change in design. And it changed the design along the way. The other vignette is me and Winfred Avogo having lunch 2 or 3 times in a row because I teach this class, and then my students go off and take Soc 300 with him as they are doing this very semester. The students I had last semester, half of them took him this semester. And over, he's emphasized to me that in quantitative research, data gathering and data analysis occur together, and it can change the design along the way. So when the book says that this is a unique feature of qualitative research, data gathering and data analysis happen at the same time. No, actually, that's not true. Winfred has told me that he and everybody in quantitative research, they ponder the meaning of the data and try to understand the data as they're collecting it, even when using secondary data. And they have to change the design along the way as they collect data. So this is probably better just to think about doing in research in general. So ethnography, the word ethno means cultural group, and graphy means writing. So ethnography is what you produce when you're done your analysis. You collect your data and you're analyzed it and you've written it up. That's what an ethnography is. It's very easy to think you're studying individual people, and when you interview individual people, you are. But generally, people are influenced by other people, socialization. So you're really looking at collective thoughts, culture. What do groups think and feel about their world? That's why you think of cultural groups. That's why you produce an ethnography. This is really important to keep in mind as you're studying. Even if you're talking to an individual, they are in many ways influenced by those around them, and their thoughts are not their own thoughts. That's probably really frustrating for you. Your thoughts are not your own thoughts, but I'm so aware of it. Now, an ethnography, I hate that word, but I can see why they do it. If you were to do an ethnography on Twitter, that's cesspool, and compare it by doing an ethnography on Facebook and look at how people interact, you'd see very different cultural assumptions. I mean, it's written into the software, but that just tells you about the people writing the software. You are getting their assumptions. How is this supposed to work? But also you get to see how people make it work. That people using Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr, and they've asked Instagram, they've suggested modifications, mods, and that's because their groups work a certain way. So even an ethnography will be oriented toward culture. Okay, first method, participant observation. What is it? It's going into a group and watching and listening, and therefore taking notes. I should probably have taken that out of the PowerPoint, but what the hell? While you're participating with them, while you're not only watching and listening, you're talking and doing. Maybe you don't care about participant observation, but it's worth knowing how they are produced because some of you have been assigned them. I've been told that Aaron Pitlick and Richard Sullivan in different classes assigned Arlie Hochschild's Strangers in Their Own Land. That's a participant observation. Sure, it's full of interviews, but she went to rural Georgia. Spent years there. How she did that, I guess she's retired. This is classically done in anthropology. This is the method of ethnographers in anthropology. Go live with, quote unquote, the natives. Yes, that's a racist term. Nobody says that anymore. Go live with the people you're studying for a year or two and take notes every single day. Excuse me. And then write up those notes. At the end, you come home and you write them up. But of course, again, data collection, data analysis go together. While you're there, you're pondering. And then you leave and you ponder some more. So data analysis continues even when data collection ends. But they were doing this in anthropology by the 1890s. They were doing this by the 1920s in sociology. There are other examples of classic examples. I will mention one soon. In sociology of participant observations. The purpose is really straightforward, is understanding the group. It's really difficult when you're studying people very different from yourself. Arlie Hochschild is this sociology professor from Berkeley. I mean, how much more opposite the Tea Party can you get? But that's her. And she pulled off the difficult task of seeing them in their homes, their churches, their stores, their restaurants, their parties, their jobs, without judging them, trying to understand where they're coming from. That doesn't mean she gives up her own beliefs. She just puts them on hold for a few minutes to understand somebody very different. That's really key to understanding. So, for instance, I take a very dim view of conspiracy theories. If you believe in them, fine, but I'm going to respectfully disagree. But if I were to try to understand why people come up with conspiracy theories, if I go in and saying, well, I take a very dim view, that nobody's going to tell me anything. I'm not going to understand. I'm going in judging them? No. So you have to go in with your own thoughts on hold, and it is very difficult, and most people can't do it. But it really yields understanding. So the book talks about two ethical issues. Do you observe and just sit there and watch, or do you actually join in? And it's, I don't know, in a lot of research, there's no question. You join in, you live like other people do. In some situations, yeah, you're just going to sit there and watch. Participant observation can be done at, for instance, schools, lab schools, like Metcalf and U-High here. University High School, Metcalf Elementary and Junior High. They're run by Illinois State, and you're they are students are researched. Basically, you're a parent, you have your kid go there, and you sign a waiver saying, yeah, people can do research. And then somebody sits in the class watching. people who are like education majors and people in the School of Ed doing their research. They're just watching, they're just observing. But I would say in sociology, most researchers participate. The other question is covert or overt. I would say this is more of an ethical issue than just watching or participating, though participating can get you in trouble. To just blab, hey, I'm a researcher. That in some situations can get you killed, or it just means you can't get your research done because nobody will talk to you. But if you don't tell people, are you a liar? Are you hiding something that's important? Is that okay? So it's really a question. And sampling is really a question. Um, sorry, skipped entering the field. You need what's called a gatekeeper, somebody who will introduce you to other people. And as you get introduced to other people, then you develop relationships. Now, there's this book, which is somewhat controversial, called Gang Leader for a Day by Sudhir Venkatesh from the University of Chicago. That's where he got his PhD. And he got to know people. He was in Hyde Park, and Hyde Park is on the south side of Chicago. It's this little enclave of rich people in the south side. And he was a grad student there in sociology, and he got to know people in the projects nearby and people in the neighborhood nearby. And he had some dicey situations, but he was eventually accepted, and those people would be gatekeepers that allowed him in to study what was going on in the neighborhood. That turned into his dissertation and became a book. Elijah Anderson wrote Streetwise in the 80s. He published it in 1990. I read it in grad school. He didn't need a gatekeeper because he was a professor, I believe, at Temple University in Philadelphia. He lived in Philadelphia. He lived in a neighborhood. He just started studying his own neighborhood. Didn't need a gatekeeper. So you don't always need one, but it helps. And sampling, it depends on what you're trying to do. Not everybody tries for it. Multiple sites, if you go to different stores and different community groups and different this and different that, yeah, it will help you strengthen your conclusions and allow you to make more general statements about that group. Not everybody is always going for that. Now, the whole key to participant observation is notes. And jottings, I've done this. I did this in Soch 300. I had never really done much participant observation myself. Being a historical sociologist, I did one afternoon of it and got patted on the head by my professor. Good job. And I always wondered if I really did. So I decided to do participant observation, take notes, because I was teaching it in Soch 300 this semester right now. I'm almost done. And I should do what I'm making them do. And it is hard, and it helps to take just little bitty notes of what happens in order. Because then when you type up your notes after, it jogs your memory. And I had to do it that afternoon. So I would go through an hour and a half of a seminar, trying to get everybody to talk, because it was a seminar. It was mostly discussion. And then go to my office and type like a fiend to try to remember everything. That's what participant observation looks like. So extensive notes right after from the jottings or just straight out of memory. All right, the possibly even more classic collection method, data collection method, is interviews rather than participant observation. Basically, it's asking open-ended questions. And you're getting people to talk to get that full picture of their context and their actions and thoughts. Now, an IRB will make you have a list of the same questions for each set of interviewees. You ask everyone the same questions. But first of all, the answers go in various directions each time. You get one answer from one person and a completely different set of answers from another, which is the point. And the list of questions is called an interview schedule. Again, I want to emphasize that interviews are not surveys. Interviews are almost always done in person, and when you're not in person, they're done live over email or Zoom or FaceTime or Google Duo or whatever thing we've fallen into in this nightmarish hellscape. Oh, it's really not that bad, let's face it. In 1918, they didn't have the internet. It was way lonelier. But they are synchronous. They are at the same time. You ask somebody and they either in person tell you or over the phone tell you or on email send you answers or in a chat room or whatever. Surveys are almost always on paper or on the internet and almost always done, not always, but almost always done when the researcher is not present. And as I've said many times, and I'll say it again, surveys are almost always quantitative. The number of times you this, the number of times you that, on a scale of 1 to 5. They're almost always numbers. Last fall certainly, and probably next fall, Maria Schmeckley did and will use qualitative surveys, open-ended surveys. But please, do not confuse interviews with surveys in your research design. Don't confuse them. Interviews are synchronous. Surveys tend to be asynchronous and almost always quantitative, and interviews are always qualitative. Now, participant observation allows more learning about context. You're there, you see it. But one of the great things about interviews is that they allow more follow-up. And follow-up is absolutely crucial because I did 4 different interviews when I was in grad school, and we got some data from them. As I said, the IRB will require you to use the same list of questions, but they know, and they give you the freedom to do. Okay, that didn't come out grammatically. They know you're going to need follow-up questions that aren't on the schedule, and they give you the freedom to do that. You have no requirement to use the same follow-up question from interviewee to interviewee. Each time it can go in any direction. And should go in the direction the interviewee gave you. When they say something new, ask about it. That's crucial. So the interview itself is you ask questions and you record the answers. And sometimes you even have a notebook there to write things down. But always now it's done by recording, and lately it's done by Otter AI, which I'm going to talk about in point 2 here. So the book advice is be nimble, follow the data wherever they lead. That's what I was saying a minute ago about follow-ups. If somebody drops a bomb on you, they say something that you have no idea was coming. You have to keep following up. Maybe you ditch your interview schedule. All the other questions don't matter because this is so new. You're going to have to go back to the IRB with a new interview schedule because this just blew your mind. It does happen. It's not typical, but it has happened. You have to be nimble. You have to be flexible. You have to be willing to change on a moment's notice. Follow-up questions. That's what he means by being nimble. So you are constructing or co-constructing. You're asking, they're telling, a text to be analyzed later. And it is literally a text. It used to be that you'd get a recording and then you would transcribe it. Otter AI, if you want to look it up, you can, because Maria Schmeckley is going to use it. Otter.ai. Just type that into Google. It simultaneously records an audio file, and types it up at the same time. It produces a written transcript. It's this written transcript that you will be analyzing. It's really important. But you have to keep in mind you are producing a text as you talk and listen. It's also important here at number 3 to remember that I was told this, and then it happened. My professor, Nicole Biggert, who ended up as the dean of the Graduate School of Management. She was in sociology and the business school. Um, and she ended up running the business school for a few years. She was my professor when I was doing this qualitative stuff. And she said, you've got to be ready. When you turn that recorder off, suddenly they tell you the real stuff. And she was absolutely right. It happened to me at least once. I think it happened twice. Like, wow, you just told me that and the recorder's off? I'm thinking that. I'm not telling them that. So as soon as they I shook their hand, thank you again. It's been like 2 minutes since the recorder's off and they dropped a bomb on me. Go around the corner, right like hell. Because you've just got to keep that in mind. People are aware when there's a recorder on. But when the recorder goes off, you've got to keep your ears open. It's amazing. So be ready to capture it. All right, the final data collection method I'm going to talk about is focus groups. So what are they? They are a group of participants selected and then gathered together in a room to discuss a topic in the presence of researchers. And the idea is that when one person mentions something, the other 5 or 7 or 8 or whatever go, oh yeah, and then it extends the conversation. They're doing it as a group on purpose, and they're all strangers. You almost never get a focus group of people who know each other. In fact, some people go out of their way to make sure nobody in the room knows each other. But nevertheless, if you get the conversation going properly, you're getting people to stimulate each other's thinking about the topic at hand. And more comes out that way. Now, the two oh my God, very common uses are marketing and politics. Political campaigns use focus groups all the time. And companies use focus groups all the time for new products. And I was in 2 focus groups in Sacramento because I needed the money. That's what they do. Focus groups will pay you. What they're doing is they're paying you for your time. And they want you to be honest. They're not paying you to lie. They really, really do want to know the truth. It's nice to make money and say what you really think. That's what they want. So one each. I did one each. I remember there was a political issue. There was a product. The 2 times I did it when I was finishing up my PhD, and wow, did we need the money. So you yourself, if you end up in a company or you end up on a political campaign someday, don't be surprised. Focus groups. So how it works, you somehow get people to come in and then you pay them, or you pay them at the end. You get people who are part of the target population. The target population is defined demographically, certain age and race and, political persuasion or lifestyle. You sit around a table and there's a leader, and sometimes there are 2 leaders, but then there are other people from the company who are taking notes, and it's probably videotaped. It's sure as hell audio taped, probably videotaped. And they get a conversation going about the topic, and they want to know what you think and why you think it and what's related to that. So this is one of this is a method from the social sciences that has become very, very applied, very, very practical. Really does affect how people live their lives in politics and companies and what they do. And it came straight out of social science. So the IRB is going to have its heavy hand all over anything you do if you're going to deal with live people. And they have good reason to have their heavy hands to get all in your business because you might harm them. We've talked about this. So the first thing they're going to want to do is have you come up with and then have all your participants sign a form that is a consent form that tells them exactly what you're going to do, gives them the right to bail out or, yeah, no, the right to bail out in the middle. It does happen. It's rare. But you're going along and answering questions and you ask them one more question. It's okay, we're done here. Goodbye. They have that right. The consent can be withdrawn at any time. But you give them the form and they keep a form. They sign it twice. You keep one, they keep one. And it lays out everything that you're doing and all their rights. They have to give you full consent and they have to participate in completely non-coerced way. And that means you need to pay close attention to their well-being. God, suppose you're interviewing Vietnam vets or Iraq war vets or Afghanistan war vets about their experiences. And you're calling all that stuff up again about the people they killed and watching the buddies they lost and other things they did and being so far away from their families. And that's not going to help their well-being. You better have really good reasons for bringing something up like that. I mean, even if COVID-19, what was it like to lose somebody to this disease? What was it like to be a doctor or a nurse? I can almost guarantee you there will be qualitative research done about healthcare professionals later on to improve health care later on, because this is not going to be the last pandemic. So they want to know how to improve it. And you have to, interviewing people, you have to pay attention to their well-being. Um, that's why you have to get consent. Can you hack it in talking about all the people you lost? You put them on a ventilator and the next morning they were gone. That's why you run all this past an IRB. And that's why you do your best to guarantee confidentiality. And as I said, you can't, but you do your damnedest to get as close as possible to guaranteeing it in your procedures about how you protect your data. And there is a section in the proposal that talks about how are you going to protect the data. Are you going to keep it on flash drives? Are you going to keep it in a safe? Are you going to keep it on a server? Are you going to keep it, God, are you going to keep it on an internet server that anybody can hack? What? Things like that. You've got to think about things like that. What are you going to do with the data once you have it? And then after how many years are you going to keep it? Are you going to ditch it at some point? Are you going to, how do you really and truly wipe a flash drive? How do you really and truly wipe data from Google or wherever you've stored it? How do you really and truly wipe it from a hard drive? Is that possible these days? You got to think about things like that because the data could someday get out there. You never know. And finally, there are all sorts of questions about boundaries, which I was going to have in here. I'll put it in. Are you going to fake friendship? Suppose you do this in participant observation. Do you fake friendship? Or then there's the racist term of going native, that you adopt their beliefs so completely that you're not really doing research anymore. People have more than once felt betrayed by the researchers once the researcher wrote the book. They would say, excuse me, I thought we were friends. And no, you're doing research. So figuring out boundaries is not easy when you're doing research. And finally, you have to keep yourself safe. You can't do research if you're dead, or even if you're just incapacitated. That's what I've got for you this afternoon on qualitative data collection. There's way more that you would get in grad school, but oh boy, this is enough. I hope I've made the case that qualitative data, just by talking about the methods, you get the sense that qualitative data does really offer insights that quantitative data cannot offer. And by seeing how one collects primary qualitative data, I hope you've seen just how important it is. Got one more of these, and I will talk to you then. Well, we've got two more. I am planning, there's one more formal one, and then I'm planning to do one, just so you know, on how to write the final paper. I'm hoping to make that really short. So, see ya.